Nicky Lynn.
You figured it out.
Yeah, nah, he's a great guy. What a character.
Yeah, man. He's actually working with us now. He's part of Prospect Dugout, so we're doing some cool things with me. I'm excited.
That's cool, man. Nah, that's great.
So
He's
you
he'll spread the word.
Oh yeah, for sure. So you knew obviously Nick from that 2009 team. So kind of just tell me what that was like personally for you winning, the World Series in 2009, part of the New York Yankees.
Well, listen, for me, I was a kid. I grew up in New York, so that was my team. So I grew up as a kid watching all those parades and all that champagne being poured over players' heads like Derek Jeter, Jorge Posada, um, Mariano, and all those
Mhm.
guys. So I remember as a kid, staying up late watching all these World Series games, um, and I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world to be in a big league clubhouse after the team won and just being a part of that big party. And it's real. I learned in 2009 that, that's the greatest part about being a champion is sort of that moment where that champagne pops. And as a team and as a brotherhood, you get to connect at a really deep level and have a blast, and we did. And that brought our team closer and closer every year because we were always in the playoffs. So it was amazing.
I was on mute because I was typing something. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Thank you, Dana, for joining me today. This is the Corners In podcast on the Prospect Dugout Network. I am your host, Joel Hartman. And if you are watching right now on Facebook or YouTube, I'd appreciate it if you hit the share button so your friends and family can see what you're watching. If you have any questions, please make sure to drop those in the comments. We're gonna go through some deep stuff today. Today, I am joined by he's a great guy. He's a mental coach. He knows what he's talking about, and he's got the resume to back it up. He was with the New York Yankees in 2009, helping lead them mentally to the World Series championship. A lot of cool stories, a lot of cool things. I wouldn't have met Dana if not for my friend at my local CrossFit, Kevin. Thank you so much for setting this up for us. So I'm really excited today. Dana Cavalier, dude, you're awesome. You're a mental guy. I love the mental side of the game. I'm not even going to ask you about yourself. I'm just going to get right into. I got your book. I'm going to pop it up on the screen right here, called Habits of a Champion. Yeah, and so I started reading it, and in your book, you asked the question, "Do you love to hate or do you love to win or hate to lose?" And then you mentioned that research shows that those who actually make it beyond their genetic talent often come from a situation of hardship. How should we be answering that question? Do you love to win or hate to lose?
Well, I mean, I think you have to always answer it genuinely, right? It's always who you are that will determine your answer. So the first thing I love to do as a coach, and again, I coach the physical as well. Like my mental side, I've adopted that, during my coaching career. But I was a physical coach too, strength and conditioning, high performance coach. And what I found is those players, when you ask them the question, any player, do you love to win or do you hate to lose? You know, every player loves to win, but the player that hates to lose, that's a special player. That's that sort of junkyard dog kind of player that's going to be relentless. That's a Dustin Pedroia type player who's short, undersized. Everything is against him. And he says, you know what? That's great, but I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you what a champion looks like. And that's the whole idea behind do you hate to lose? And players like Derek Jeter, he'd be the first one to raise his hand. I hate to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's, when you come from a situation where everything's not perfect, that sort of brews that and brings about that competitor spirit. So I look at people, hey, you don't have a perfect situation, that's awesome, man. You better use that chip on your shoulder to drive you forward. And baseball is one of those games where you could use a chip on your shoulder to take you really
Absolutely.
far.
Absolutely. You're watching the Corners In podcast. I'm joined by Dana Cavalier, the former director of performance for the New York Yankees, 2009. Dude, we just talked about, loving to win or hating to lose and coming from a situation of hardship. You also talked about in your book, I'm going to put it back up on the screen, Habits of a Champion. Never get too high, never get too low is the chapter title. And you said, Do you want the edge in your competition? Train your mental state, train to remain calm. You quoted Derek Jeter as saying, the more I struggle, the more I don't hit, the closer I am to getting one. Talk to me about staying calm through the good and the bad and avoiding what you call in your book panic buttons.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's look at it like this, right? As hitters, what do we want to do? Right? We want to get a hit every time up. But the rules of the game in which we play, we know that that's not possible, right?
Mhm.
There's never been a hitter that's batted 1,000. So when we have these expectations of batting 1,000, it
Mhm.
sets us up to get really disappointed, which is to get really low.
Right.
Where instead, a better conversation to have with an athlete and with a player is this: let's go have competitive at bats, right? I remember I'd watch so many games in the dugout with AJ Burnett, and we'd see a player get up, he'd take 3 swings and walk back to the dugout, and AJ would smirk at me and laugh and say, that was a very non-competitive at bat. That wasn't a competitive at bat. So even as a pitcher, he was looking for competitors and competitive at bats, and that will help you not get super high and not get super low, because your expectations are, I can get in the box. I don't know if I'm going to get a hit every time, but I do know that I'm going to be competitive. I'm going to see the pitches that I need to see. I'm going to swing at the pitches that I know are good for me to swing at. That's a competitive at bat. So I always tell players, don't get pissed off if you don't get a hit. Be more pissed off if you haven't had a competitive at bat. You must compete
Yep. Every time. That's it.
every time.
Have to.
Yep.
You're listening to the Corners In podcast, joined by Dana Cavalier, and dude, I'm just another question from your book, man. I'm
Thanks for
sucked into
singing
this
it.
thing. I'm sucked into this thing. Habits of a
Thank you.
Champion. In your chapter, consistency over time yields results, and I really love this chapter. You said that your path is part of who you are. Your experiences, your history, your likes, your dislikes, your preferences, your disposition, and your demeanor. All of that determines your path. Why should we make consistency our number one habit?
Because without consistency, you don't know what led you to success.
Mm.
And you also don't know what led you to failure. So ultimately, right, if we're going to play this game of baseball, we're definitely going to fail, but we're definitely going to succeed too, right? If we can focus on, again, being competitive in every opportunity that we have. But it's super important that we sort of stay within ourselves at all times. And I just believe that consistency, having watched these players, again, the Hall of Famers, the Jeters, the Riveras, even guys like Swish, long-term players, when you watch their habits, they have very consistent habits and behaviors that allow them to have very predictable outcomes. When I see a player that does one thing on Monday, something else on Tuesday, they have a different warm-up on Thursday, and they're just all over the place, and players that are fiddling with their uniform too much, they got a wristband this color one day, another one, that just shows that you don't truly trust yourself as a player.
Mhm.
You don't know who you are. And if you don't know who you are, this is a game that is going to strip that uniform off you and make you feel like you're standing at bat with the lights on and your
Right.
butt naked.
Right. No, at an elementary level, I use that same concept with my players. I say, if you're constantly moving around to a different spot in the batter's box, how are you ever going to be consistent with that pitcher? You're in the back of the box for one at bat, and then in the front of the box the next at bat. How are you ever going to understand what that pitcher has? So I think that, at the elementary level, even, being consistent can really, help you out.
Yeah, I agree, man.
All right. So failing to plan equals planning to fail. You said find what makes you tick, find what you're passionate about, create a plan, and attack it with tenacity, confidence, and velocity. I'm talking with Dana Cavalier, mental performance coach, member of the 2009 World Series Yankees championship team. You said to adjust as needed. That's your plan. Believe in it, own it, make it happen for yourself. What is so important about a plan?
Well, if you don't have a plan, you're constantly adapting, right? So you don't ever have any sort of solid footing that you're working on.
Mhm.
So I work with players a lot, and I say, listen, who are you as a player? And you'll be amazed at how many players, they can't define who they are, right? They can't define the type of player they are. They don't know the game that they play, right? And if you have a four hitter that's trying to play like a leadoff guy, and you have a leadoff guy trying to play like a four, you're in big trouble. So you got to know the type of player that you are in order to feel comfortable. And I listen, all this stuff that I speak about, I'm speaking about it through experience as a player and as a coach. And I spent so many years as a player uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable with my skills, uncomfortable with who I was, because I just didn't know who I was as a player. So I was constantly trying to emulate and be like a player that was better than me, but we were totally different players.
Yeah. I'm joined by Dana Cavalier, mental performance coach, and you got a great book. It's called Habits of a Champion. I'm gonna throw it up here on the screen again. I ordered it this past weekend. I'm almost all the way through it. It's a great read. It's got a lot of cool stories from the championship season in 2009 when you were with the New York Yankees, and you had some stories in there from Mark Teixeira, Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera. Why don't you talk to me a little bit about if you didn't have Mo's green tea and his massage ready or something like that in the fifth inning?
Yeah, no, every day, every day in the sixth inning or so, I had to be ready for when the great Mariano Rivera would come into the training room after his massage, right? He'd come in for me to get stretched. We'd talk, we'd sort of get him prepped and ready to go. And if I wasn't there waiting with a green tea and honey and a green Nature's Valley granola bar, my man was not happy. He was screaming my name, and I could have been in my office. No. He wanted me to be right there to greet him upon arrival. So
Yeah.
that was consistency, and that was his habit, and that was his routine. So,
Yeah.
I got to honor that. That's my job, right? My job as a coach is
For
to
sure.
support the player and make sure that we got everything we need to have for them to perform at the highest possible level.
Yeah. So yeah, that was consistency in his routine, but like, why is it that? Like, what does that have to do with anything? Is it something specific? I know you talked about in your book, you got to you got to figure out what works for you.
Yeah. Well, for him, I believe it's this. Late in the game is when he had to play. He had to go into the game late in the game. So he couldn't have anything really heavy on his stomach. He wasn't a coffee guy, but he really wasn't a real night owl. So at the same time, having a little tea, right, gives him a little blast of caffeine, which turns the lights on a bit. My stretching, again, turned the lights on a little bit more. And the weight room, was on the way out to the bullpen. So It was a very convenient stop. So again, we got a little something for energy in terms of a granola bar. So it's nothing crazy, but that is what he found to work well
Right.
for him. I mean, Andy Pettit in the middle of the game used to be screaming for coconut water and a Snickers because he cramps, and he would also see these drops in terms of his blood sugar. So every player is different, and I loved it. I mean, I love that every player is different.
That's awesome. So why don't you talk to me for a minute or so just about who you are and what you do, who you're speaking with, who you're meeting with on a daily basis, and what exactly goes on in your world?
Yeah. So in my world, I'm a high performance coach. I work on the physical and mental side of performance. So I help players get in better shape physically, strength and conditioning side, and then on the performance side, the mental performance side, to make them more secure in who they are as a player. Those doubts that creep in, those times where you get into the batter's box and you're more worried about not getting a hit. You want to get a hit, but you can't stop thinking about not getting a hit. And what if it happens where I don't get a hit and I let the team down? So I work on player psychology in that way, but I work on the physical to give them the physical strength and tools to get bigger, faster, stronger, and make them a better player. So when you take the physical and the mental and you put it together, that's how you get a complete player. So I always say, people say, what do you do? I'm in the business of building champions. I build champion athletes and champion players that can go on and play at the next level. So that's what I say. If you want to go to the next level, let's make it happen.
Yeah, for sure. So bringing everything to current day, current situation, current life, um, thinking about high school and amateur players that have missed out on their spring season, that it's 2020 is just crazy going on right now. What kind of tips, or what's something that a high school player or a high school parent or a youth parent, as baseball's starting to get back into action, what is something that they can work on the mental side right now?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Your mental will become weak when your physical is weak. So I talk a lot with players now. Listen, even though you're not playing ball right now, you better be training at least 3 days a week. You better be on an arm exercise program at least 3 days a week. You better be throwing at least 3 days a week. Pitchers, you better be throwing bullpens, and hitters, you better be taking your hacks, right? On a schedule, right? It's not up for debate like, oh, should I do it today? There's a lot of that in the amateur player. It's got to be scheduled. You can't be an amateur and say you want to be a pro and then act like an amateur. So you better get on a schedule. You better get on a routine and realize that by you being on that schedule, you being on that routine, and you investing in your skill work and your physicality on a day-to-day basis, your mental state will improve as a result. Because whenever that siren goes off and the green light hits and they say, hey, we're ready for baseball, you will be ready for baseball.
Absolutely. So I ordered your book off Amazon, but your website is danacavalia.com. Your name is right here on the screen so they can spell it out. But you title it Habits of a Champion, but then I'll put it up on the screen so people can see it. You titled it Habits of a Champion, but then it also says nobody becomes a champion by accident. Tell me what that means.
Nobody becomes a champion by accident. So in order to be a champion, it's not something that's just going to happen to you where all of a sudden somebody's going to drop pixie dust on top of you and you're going to become this champion player. It takes work to become a champion. It takes guts to become a champion. It takes nuts to become a champion.
Mm-hmm.
And it means there's going to be some things that you're going to have to do that you're not comfortable with. You're going to have to train when your friends may be out hanging out doing something else. You must commit to being great. And I meet a lot of kids today that they want to be known as a baseball player, but they don't want to be known as great. They want people to know that they're on the team and they're a part of the team, but they're not actually there to compete, dominate, and help that team win a championship.
Talk to me about being a leader.
Yeah, well, you become a leader through your actions, right? The worst thing you could do is say, I'm a leader, right? Leaders don't tell you they're leaders. Derek Jeter never came out and said, hi, I'm Derek Jeter and I'm the captain.
Mm-hmm.
He was recognized for his abilities and his talents and the way in which he went about his business. He was recognized for his consistency and attitude and behavior. He was recognized for his consistency in his day-to-day work ethic. And he was also recognized for how he treated each and every player on that team as a great teammate and as a winner. And if he saw somebody that was down, he worked to bring them up. And that's what leaders do.
Mm-hmm.
But leaders are not the people that say, I'm a leader. I want to be a leader. Stop saying it and just go do it.
Absolutely. That leads me into my last question that I have for you. Don't talk about it, be about it. What does that mean? Don't talk about it, be about it.
I got that from my father. A couple different things. You know, I used to ride home from the ball games with my dad, and some days I really sucked and some days I was really great. But I always felt like I was never recognized, right? And my dad would always say, don't tell me, show me, right? And the other thing he would say is everything's about delayed gratification. So just because you practice today, just because you take a couple swings doesn't guarantee you a great game. It doesn't guarantee you 4 for 4. It doesn't guarantee you, a perfect game. But what it does is it calms you down and it lets you know that this is all about a process. So don't tell me, show me. I don't need you to tell me how great you are. I don't need to see how magnificent you are on Instagram and TikTok and all these social medias. Go out there, compete, play big, play hard, be a competitor, and people will start to notice, right? You can't buy your way to the big leagues. You can't. No matter how rich your parents are, you can't buy your way there. You must compete, and people will recognize that, especially the scouts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you talk about habits, right? You're talking about habits. Okay. You're not talking about the results. You're not talking about Derek Jeter and how many hits he got or how many World Series championships he won. You're talking about the habits of that player and the mindset of that player. What are 3 good habits that a young baseball player can implement into his life starting right now, starting today? 3 habits that he can start today that's going to change his life and put him on the course of where he needs to be in his life.
Yeah. So the 3 habits that I say is you got to train physically at least 3 days a week. That's number 1. Number 2, you have to visualize yourself having success. So there has to be times, and I talked to Andy Pettit about this a lot. When he would pitch, he'd put his hands right here. He'd go through his windup, but he'd go through his windup only after he took a strategic pause And during that pause, he would actually throw the pitch, and then he'd go through his windup and match what he just visualized, right? So you got to train physically. You have to visualize yourself having success. So visualize yourself in the batter's box, visualize yourself on the mound, but visualize yourself doing the things that you're training and practicing. And the last thing is, I say, you have to do what I call these I am statements, right? Most baseball players, here's the reality. A lot of players are hesitant. They're fearful. They're a little scared. They're nervous, right? They're not fully in the zone at all times. So I use these I am statements to say, I am strong. I'm a great player. I am a competitor. I can play at the highest level. When you're in the shower every day, and I'm hoping everybody showers every day, you get in there and you use that powerful language to get yourself moving. I am. Use your I am statements. Create a positive vision for yourself and train physically at least 3 days a week. And that right there gives you sort of this foundation for success.
Dana Cavalier, author of Habits of a Champion, member of the 2009 World Series champion Yankees team. A lot of good stuff today. I told you that was the last question. I actually got one more, and you can kind of wrap it up and kind of close this, and we'll end the live stream. But you talked about energy. Energy is a word I always like to speak of, since we only have so much of it each day. It's our job to respect, preserve, generate, and deploy that energy accordingly. You only get so much of it per day. Leave us with a little bit of your thoughts on energy.
Yeah, don't waste it, right? We only get so much of it. The game requires a lot of energy to play at a high level, right? But don't focus on the things that don't matter. Like I said, don't focus on the times you got out. Don't focus on all the failures. Use your energy to stay focused on forward and focused on where it is that you want to go, right? And anybody that's around you that's stealing your energy, friends, girlfriends, whatever it may be, you got to ask yourself, what's most important to me right now? And if being a great player is number one to you, well, you better protect your energy.
Sometimes you got to make tough decisions to get what you want.
Always. That's life, right?
That's it. Dana, thank you so much for your time today. I greatly appreciate you joining me here on the Corners In podcast on the Prospect Dugout Network. I'm your host, Joel Hartman, and I want to thank everybody else for watching on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. I hope that it impacted your life and you're able to take something away with it you can apply to your everyday life. If you want to learn more about Dana, you can go to danacavalier.com. You can get his book there. You can also get it on Amazon, Habits of a Champion. Dana, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks, Joel.